Questions for reflection. The Patriarch Abraham is mentioned in the New Testament letter to the Hebrews in chapter 11. He's a part of the parade of faith, the examples held up to all of us to emulate and imitate in our own journey of faith. He's also mentioned in the Canon of the Holy Mass. Look at how he responded to the Lord at 75 years old. He was 75 years young. Particularly in the Western world, we've bought this notion of retirement, which has no biblical foundation. Nor does it fit the living witness of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament of Christians, or the New Testament. Age is not an impediment to heroic faith. In fact, it should be the case that when we grow older, we are finally emptied enough of our own self-love and filled with God's love that we can finally surrender all and truly be used by the Lord. Hopefully, we've also gained the wisdom that life is meant to teach us. After all, life is a classroom for the disciple of the Lord, and it opens to eternity. For anyone listening or watching who, like me, is in their 60s, we need a new Abraham and Sarah generation. Now is the time to say yes to the Lord and to serve Him. In our second reading, the Apostle Paul's second letter to Timothy, a young man whom he discipled and ordained and placed in leadership over the church at Ephesus, we also see that youth is no impediment to heroic and fully surrendered leadership in the Lord. No matter whether we are young or old or anywhere in between, every one of us who bears the name Christian are called to place Jesus Christ and His church at the center of our lives and give ourselves completely to Him, no matter what our state in life, vocation, or career. We are first, last, and all in between disciples. Every year, I'm asked a variation of this question. Why, on the second Sunday of Lent, does the church offer us an account of the transfiguration of Jesus? The inclusion of this account is an ancient liturgical practice. We also hear the account proclaimed on the feast of the Transfiguration of the Lord. Whether during Lent or on its own feast, the gospel account is meant to focus us on the end of the Christian life and our own vocation. End, as used in the philosophical and theological sense, means purpose or goal. We will all be transfigured, as the Lord Himself was transfigured, when our redemption is complete in the resurrection of the body. Then we will live in the new heaven and new earth, in the fullness of the communion of love. This reality is meant to affect the way we live our lives beginning right now. It also helps us understand one of the purposes of undertaking our ascetical practices during these 40 days. In the Eastern Christian churches, Orthodox and Catholic, the first week of the Great Lent is called Clean Week, and the focus of the week is to enter fully into the Lenten practices of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving with fervor. It's setting the pace for the 40 days by running the first lap with a vigorous effort. Strict fasting is encouraged along with frequent prayer and almsgiving, and the intensity of the first week is intended to cultivate the proper disposition needed to achieve the desired end of the 40 days of Lent, ongoing conversion of life, reflected in a new way of living. You see, our freedom was fractured by sin, and the way it can be healed is through the application of the splint of the cross. However, that cross must be embraced. The call goes out to clean house, to be rid of all sin and entanglements which hold us back from reclaiming the freedom the Lord desires for each one of us. In fact, in many Orthodox and Eastern Catholic communities, the actual houses of believers are cleaned and stripped of excess, a symbol of the interior dynamic of the week and the very essence of Lent. During the 40 days of Lent, we're called to enter into a holy struggle against our disordered passions and weaknesses so that we can become more fitting vessels for the life and light of God to dwell within, making us new. The struggle we engage in is about turning away from sin, but it's also about turning toward the total transformation of the integrated human person. It will only be complete in the resurrection of our bodies. However, it begins now. It's not accidental that the gospel of the first Sunday of Lent was the temptation of Jesus in the desert, and the gospel of the second is the transfiguration of Jesus on the mountain. They're connected. An ancient homily reminds us, and I quote, Just as the body of the Lord was glorified on the mountain when it was transfigured in the glory of God and in infinite light, so the bodies of the saints will be glorified and shine like lightning. The glory which you have given me, I have given to them. That's from John 17. It continues, as countless candles are lighted from a single flame, so the bodies of all Christ's members will be what Christ is. Our human nature is transformed into the fullness of God. It becomes holy fire and light. And that's from Pseudo Macarius, his 15th homily.